She had her coat on. She had her gloves on. The Christmas presents for her students were wrapped and sitting there, ready to go. In 45 minutes, Christy Mirack would have walked out that door, driven to Rowerstown Elementary, and handed those gifts to a room full of 6th graders 4 days before Christmas. That was the plan. That was the morning. She never made it out the door. For 26 years, the man who killed her went to work, got married, taught children how to DJ, organized community events, and lived 4 miles from where he murdered her. Nobody suspected him. Not once. And the reason nobody suspected him is exactly why this case took 2.5 decades to close, and why the way it finally closed changed how cold cases get solved across the entire country. This is the story of Christy Mirack. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. December 21, 1992. Lancaster County in December 1992 was not the kind of place where people lock their doors twice. This is Pennsylvania Dutch country. Horse and buggy roads. Amish farms along the highway. A community identity built around plain living, neighbors who knew each other, and a quietness that people from the cities sometimes drove out just to feel. The county had a nickname, the Garden Spot of America, and it earned it. Not just in the farmland but in the general atmosphere of the place. Things were settled here. Calm. Safe in a way that people didn't even think about because they never had reason to question it. Nationally, December 1992 had its own mood. Bill Clinton had just won the election. The Cold War was officially over. The economy was still shaky, but there was a cautious feeling that things might turn. Home Alone 2 was in theaters. Christmas was 4 days away. The fears people carried that year were mostly about job security, not physical safety, and certainly not physical safety in a quiet townhouse complex outside Lancaster City. Christy Mirack had grown up in Shamokin, about 90 minutes northeast, coal mining country, a very different Pennsylvania. She'd come to Lancaster County for college, studied elementary education at Millersville University, and then stayed. She had a reason to stay. She was teaching. Her brother Vince said her dream, from childhood, had been to stand in front of a classroom. She practiced on him and their sister when they were kids, setting up a little school in the house, assigning them to desks. It wasn't a passing interest. It was the thing. And by December 1992, she was living it, a 6th grade class at Rowerstown Elementary, her own students, her own room. She was 25 years old. People who knew Christy tended to use the same kind of words. Loyal. The one who picked up the phone. The one who showed up. Her college friends described her as the one people called their best friend, the person who mediated arguments, and remembered everyone's birthdays and genuinely meant it when she asked how you were doing. Her principal at Rowerstown, Harry Goodman, said the kids adored her. A coworker said she had a contagious enthusiasm and a bouncing ponytail, and she knew exactly what she wanted and had gone out and gotten it. She shared a townhouse at Greenfield Estates on William Penn Way with a female roommate. East Lampeter Township. Quiet development, young professionals, the kind of neighborhood where you wave at your neighbors and don't think much else about them. On the morning of December 21st, her roommate left for work at 7 a.m. Christy was still getting ready. She had a full day ahead, school, then the gift handout, the whole pre-Christmas routine. The roommate left. Christy was alone. Sometime in the next 45 minutes, someone entered that apartment. Her principal was the one who found her. When Christy didn't arrive at school that morning and the phone calls went unanswered, Harry Goodman got in his car. He told himself he'd probably spot her pulled over on the side of the road with a flat tire. He drove to William Penn Way hoping for exactly that. The door to the apartment was not fully closed. Inside, on the living room floor, was Christy Mirack. She was still wearing her coat. Still wearing her gloves. She had been beaten, and her face showed it. There were scuff marks on the floor that told the story of someone who had not gone quietly. She had fought back. Investigators would later conclude she may have grabbed a wooden cutting board during the struggle, not as a weapon she planned to use, but as the only thing in reach. It was turned against her. The medical examiner's findings were precise: severe blunt force trauma to the face, neck, and upper chest. A fractured jaw. Teeth knocked out. And then strangulation, first manually, then with her own scarf pulled tight until there was nothing left. She was 25 years old, and she had her coat on because she was on her way to give Christmas presents to children. Forensic teams processed that apartment carefully. DNA was collected from Christy's body and from blood drops on the carpet beneath her. A full DNA profile was generated from biological material left at the scene. It was a clean profile. Clear and usable. In 1992, that profile meant almost nothing. The technology to match it to a stranger didn't exist at any functional scale. Investigators could compare it to someone they already suspected. They could not go fishing with it. Not then. East Lampeter Township Police took the lead, with Pennsylvania State Police and eventually the FBI lending support. Within the first few days alone, more than 26 people were interviewed. Over the following months, that number would grow to over 60 men, interviewed, swabbed, cleared. The initial working theory was that Christy knew her killer. No forced entry had been obvious. That reasoning made sense on its surface, so investigators looked hard at the people in her life. Co-workers. Old classmates. Men she'd dated. A relationship she'd been keeping somewhat private was uncovered and examined fully. The man was tested, questioned, and cleared. Nobody in her orbit matched. The FBI put together a behavioral profile. The kind of person who did this, they concluded, was likely introverted. Not the life of the party. Someone who wouldn't stand out in a crowd. Investigators took that profile seriously and it shaped the direction of the search for years. There was also a witness account. Someone had seen a white vehicle near the townhouse complex that morning. Investigators zeroed in on a silver Dodge Daytona as a possible match, updated the description, circulated it. Nothing came of it. The DNA profile sat in a database waiting for a match that never came. The National Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, works on a simple principle: your profile goes in, and if someone already in the system matches, you get an alert. The problem is that CODIS can only work with people already in it. People convicted of crimes, who've had their DNA collected and logged. If your suspect has never been arrested, never been convicted, never handed over a sample, CODIS has nothing to find. Raymond Rowe had never been arrested. His DNA was not in any database. CODIS searched and found nothing, because there was nothing to find. By the mid-90s, the active leads were exhausted. More than 60 men cleared. The car sighting had produced nothing. The behavioral profile had pointed everyone in the wrong direction. The case remained technically open. Functionally, it was cold. Here is what the next 26 years looked like. Christy's mother, Geraldine, worked in garment factories back in Shamokin. She was proud of her college-educated daughter in a way that was specific and deep. Christy had been the one who made it out, made it to where she'd always wanted to be. Geraldine spent the years after December 1992 waiting for an answer that didn't come. She died in November 2002, one day after what would have been Christy's 35th birthday. She never knew who killed her daughter. That is 10 years of waiting. And then she was gone. Christy's brother Vince became the family's public face in the search for answers. He gave interviews. He kept pushing. At one point he put up a billboard, asking for information. He kept the name alive in a community that had largely moved on. Since 1992, Vince Mirack had pushed for answers, one report noted, often struggling to keep the case going and maintain the public's interest. 26 years is a long time to struggle. While Vince was doing that, Raymond Rowe was building a career. He worked at the Chameleon Club in Lancaster for 15 years starting in the early 90s, developing a reputation as one of the best DJs in the region under the name DJ Freez. He opened a retail store on North Lime Street. He launched Lancaster's first DJ school and taught more than 24 students. He performed at weddings across central Pennsylvania and into Philadelphia, New York, and New Jersey. He spent time in Chile in 1996, working at clubs in a tourist area, then came back to Lancaster and kept building. He was married 4 times. He was a regular at church. He organized community events. He was, by every available description, someone people liked. If you meet Ray, said one person who'd worked alongside him at weddings, it doesn't take you too long to understand why he's been successful. Because of his way with people. One more detail. On August 1, 1992, 4 months before Christy Mirack's murder, Raymond Rowe stood in Lancaster Square and organized a Stop the Violence rally. 4 months later, he let himself into a young woman's apartment at 7:30 in the morning while she was getting ready to hand out Christmas presents. He lived 4 miles away. Her apartment was on a likely route between his home and where he worked. Investigators would later note that during summer months, Christy and her roommate sometimes sat outside facing the street. In her wallet, on the day she died, there was a pass to the Chameleon Club. Nobody connected these things. Not for 26 years. In April 2018, California announced the arrest of Joseph James D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer. A man who had terrorized the state through the 70s and 80s, gone cold for decades, and was finally identified through a technique most people had never heard of. Genetic genealogy. Vince Mirack heard about the Golden State Killer arrest and his first thought was, why can't they do that for Christy? Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman had the same thought. His office had already taken over the cold case in 2015, fresh eyes, full restart, thousands of pages of reports reread from scratch. A prosecutor named Christine Wilson, who had been a high school senior when Christy was killed, had been spending her nights and weekends going through the files. They'd already reached out to Parabon NanoLabs in 2017 and released a DNA-generated composite image of what the suspect might look like. The image produced tips. None of them led anywhere. But the Golden State Killer arrest changed what was possible. Here is how genetic genealogy is different from CODIS. CODIS needs your DNA directly. It's a direct match system. Genetic genealogy goes sideways instead of straight. It looks for relatives. People who share chunks of your DNA because you share ancestors, even distant ones. A second cousin? A half-sibling. Someone who signed up for a consumer ancestry site just to find out where their family came from, with no idea their upload would one day matter to a murder investigation. The reason this works is biology. DNA doesn't care about legal databases. It just exists in families, passed down, shared in fragments across generations. If a genealogist can find enough distant relatives in a public database and map their family trees backward and forward, they can triangulate toward a single person who fits all the branches. CeCe Moore was Parabon's lead genealogist. She later said she felt drawn to Christy's case specifically, that it was one of the first cases she worked with law enforcement on, and that she never forgot it. On May 14, 2018, Parabon submitted its findings to Lancaster County detectives. The suspect's DNA had matched relatives in a public database. Those relatives were distant. The family trees would need to be built from scratch, working outward and then inward, eliminating branches, following names and dates and records until the map pointed to one person. The key match was a half-sister. She had uploaded her DNA to GEDmatch to explore her own family history. She had no idea. She was just curious about where she came from. That upload led CeCe Moore to Raymond Charles Rowe. On May 31, 2018, investigators followed Raymond Rowe to a DJ event at Smoketown Elementary School. The man who killed an elementary school teacher was caught at an elementary school. Detectives watched him work. At some point during the event, he discarded a piece of chewing gum. He left behind a water bottle. Investigators collected both. The DNA from that gum and that bottle went to the lab. It matched. Not just matched across multiple locations. DNA from the scene. DNA from Christy's body. DNA from the carpet beneath her where she fell. All of it pointed to the same source. The probability of a coincidental match at this level is effectively not a number most people have a practical context for. It is not 1 in a million. It is not 1 in a billion. It is a number with so many zeros that the only honest thing to say is, it was him. There is no alternative. On June 25, 2018, 25 years, 6 months, and 4 days after the murder, police arrested Raymond Rowe at his home on Whittier Lane. Without incident. He was 49 years old. It was, according to the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office, the first time genetic genealogy had been used to solve a case in the entire state of Pennsylvania. Rowe pleaded guilty on January 8, 2019. Criminal homicide, multiple counts of sexual assault, burglary. The plea took the death penalty off the table. Lancaster County President Judge Dennis Rainaker sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 60 to 120 years for the other charges. In the courtroom that day, Rowe turned toward the Mirack family and said, "I'm sorry, sir," to the family. "I can't imagine what you're going through." Christy's father, Vincent Mirack, was offered the chance to speak. He stood up, looked at the room, and collapsed in tears into his daughter's arms. "I can't talk," he said. "I can't talk." 26 years of waiting, and when the moment came, there were no words for it. There doesn't need to be. Vince Mirack found his. He looked at Raymond Rowe directly and asked the only question that actually mattered: why? Then he said, "You took away our joy. Most of all, you took away our Christy. I can only hope that the remainder of your life is as painful to you as the last 26 years have been to my family." The Mirack case did not just close. It opened something. After Rowe's conviction, DA Stedman launched a new cold case homicide unit specifically funded to apply genetic genealogy to other unsolved Lancaster County murders. The technique that identified Rowe, publicly available ancestry databases, distant relative matching, patient family tree construction, was now part of the official toolkit. GEDmatch updated its privacy policy as a direct result of cases like this one, shifting from opt-out to opt-in for law enforcement searches. A quiet but significant consequence of a piece of chewing gum collected at an elementary school. In 2018 alone, investigators across the country used the same approach to identify suspects in 28 cold cases. The number has grown considerably since. The power of this new partnership between genetic genealogy and law enforcement, CeCe Moore said, has unlocked one of the biggest crime-fighting breakthroughs in decades. She's not wrong. And Christy Mirack's case is part of why. A few things worth taking from this, practically. If you live alone or share your space with someone, be thoughtful about visible routines. Rowe is believed to have known the exact window when Mirack would be alone because her schedule was observable from the street. If you're in law enforcement, evidence preservation is everything. The DNA collected in 1992 was usable in 2018 because someone stored it correctly. That decision, made by technicians who had no idea what technology was coming, made justice possible. And if you have old cold cases in your family or community, genetic genealogy is now a real option. It requires a working DNA profile and access to genealogy databases, but it is no longer experimental. It is how cases get solved now. Christy Mirack went to college in Lancaster County and never left because she found exactly what she wanted there. A classroom. Children. A life she had been planning since she set up a little school in her childhood home and assigned her brother and sister to desks. She had her coat on. She had her gifts wrapped. She was 25 years old, and she deserved every year that came after that. If this story stays with you, share it. Not for the numbers, but because Vince Mirack spent 26 years trying to keep his sister's name in front of people who might help. That instinct mattered. It still does. Subscribe if you're new. There are more of these stories to tell.